M. Night Shyamalan movies, I tell you. His movies are like a loot box. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm in for. His movie could be something that's amazing, could be something that sucks, could be surprisingly enjoyable, could be a thing I don't care to experience again in my life. But I'm always interested to open the box. I'm like Brad Pitt in Seven. What's in the box? This is the only time I can compare myself to Brad Pitt. But point is, new Shyamalan film. Let's do it. So Old is a movie written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I guess it's based off of a novel or something like that. I know nothing about the novel that it's based on. I guess it's not a direct translation, but based on. So the basic premise, pretty simple. There's this family, they're on this vacation, they go to this beach, and then other families join them on this beach, and then they realize that people are getting older very quickly on this beach. Enter the Shyamalan thrills and mystery and sometimes cheesy, awkward dialogue that sticks out. But I've always enjoyed this specific type of execution in the horror thriller genre, this group of people in this one isolated area, they just can't get out. Like that movie, The Ruins. I guess not a lot of people like that movie. I was a projectionist at a movie theater at the time. I was like, I'm gonna watch a scene in The Ruins. Oh, turned up the volume up in the projection booth. I was like, oh, it's at the beginning. And I just ended up watching The Ruins and really enjoyed it. Haven't seen it since 2008. Maybe it sucks. I don't know. But I like that kind of scenario where it's just like, we're isolated, bad things are happening, we need to get out of here, and we're just kind of at the whim of the situation, at the whim of nature, at the whim of sped up time. It's interesting. It's like a social experiment. What would this group do in this intense situation that simultaneously is changing everyone around you, also making you come face to face with your mortality? Also come face to face with the people you love around you and their mortality, and what would other people do if they're around people, and suspicions, and that's when the movie's at its strongest. The movie Old, not The Ruins. Did I make that transition? The bummer is this movie was executed in a way where it looks like it was supposed to have a super vague year 2000 M. Night Shyamalan trailer, kind of like Unbreakable, where you could just have Bruce Willis sitting down, hearing that he survived a train wreck, and that's that, because you're gonna watch the movie because you saw The Sixth Sense. In the way the slow reveal of, hey, there are rusted things on the beach, and way some people are looking a little older, to the way the camera is kind of blurring out the faces of the kids and not showing their faces because they're supposed to look different because the parents don't notice yet. It was really interesting. It was very well executed. Then when the aging starts getting noticed in the kids who are like, oh, you're teenagers now, but you're still mentally 5 or 6 years old, I thought that was a great layer on the performances. These actors who were playing teenagers had to still play characters who were mentally not teenagers yet. They were 5 and 6. I felt it was strong, it was great, and I felt like it kind of went away at a point. Because then the movie's a series of situations and scenarios that happen that have to do with the fact that time is sped up, but we know that. There's no intrigue there. We know it's happening. It is cool to see the things that M. Night Shyamalan thought about, how we could apply sped up time to elements that speak to horror. There are a couple elements later on in the movie that I was like, it's imaginative, it's creepy, and I liked it. Rufus Sewell is one of the standouts in this movie, because he always is. Rufus Sewell is always a standout in most anything he's in. He brings kind of an overbearing, uneasy, what's going on with this guy, creepy element to the movie, which is ironic because his character is also a doctor. So one of the more unsettling characters in this movie is one of the most advantageous people to have on a beach like this. A doctor. But among the scenarios that happen to these people on this beach, there's one in particular where I was like, oh, okay. I saw it in the trailer, so I want to say spoiler-ish, but it's in the trailer if you know what you're looking at. Because in the trailer, I was like, oh, kids, and they start rapidly aging, so they look like teenagers, and wait a minute, they're not gonna go there. They do. I mean, it doesn't show it or anything, but they're hanging out in the tent, and they come out, and unless it's the Immaculate Conception, in which cue the trumpets, something happened in there. With two characters who are physically 14, 15-year-olds, mentally 5 or 6-year-olds. Yeah, it's weird. Objectively, it is logical that that would happen in that scenario when you have two kids in a tent and they're rapidly aging and they go past puberty and they're like, oh, I have all these other emotions and thoughts and things I want to do and there are no parents around. It would probably happen. That said, how does it serve the movie? Not at all. You could edit the rapidly aging pregnancy scenario out of this movie and it wouldn't affect the movie at all. It's just one of the many things that happens to these people on this beach. I mean, it's just not something you remember after the movie. You'll remember it a little bit. Like, I remember it because I remember watching the movie. I was like, oh, great. Okay, so I have to address this in my video. Perfect. So I had a different mental assessment than other people who will watch this movie. That said, I said it, and now you know. and now my job is done. So on one hand, there's an interesting movie in here about seeing rapid growth and the introspective nature of aging and facing your mortality, but it's buried under these messy M. Night Shyamalan-isms, some of which is just cheesy lines spoken from people. You know how directors have those things where you're like, you wrote that. With M. Night Shyamalan, it's usually someone awkwardly saying something at the wrong moment. Also, there's a lot of exposition in this movie. You remember in Gladiator when Maximus was gonna get executed, and the guy tried to draw a sword and he couldn't? He was like, frost makes the blade stick. Because if Maximus hadn't said that, most of the audience would be like, why couldn't he unsheath his sword? So sometimes you have to have the characters explain things to the audience. This movie does that all the time. Right down to these moments where it's like this on-the-nose round table discussion of like, what's going on? I think this is going on. It's like, man, that's not Occam's razor. You made all these leaps. And I think you're right. Like, you're definitely not wrong. This is the movie explaining what's going on to us. But man, those leaps. Doesn't make any sense that you would know that. That could have been done in a more clever way. Heck, I didn't even have to know why this was happening to these people. Sometimes horror is horror and you just don't always get to know why. And there is a point in this movie where I was like, and if the movie had ended there, that would have been fine. That would have been perfect, would have saved some time. But, you know, you gotta keep going and you gotta show more things than you actually need to show. In the end, this movie reminded me of when my dad and I would go to Hollywood Video or Blockbuster or something. He would stumble across some weird rando-ass movie, probably horror or thriller or something. He was like, oh, have you seen this movie? I'm like, no, not at all. Kinda never even heard of it. He was like, oh, I'm not gonna tell you anything about it, but we gotta watch it. This movie's like that. It's one of those movies, you know? It's one of those movies you're supposed to show somebody who knows nothing about the premise. Sadly, a lot of us do, so that ruins an element of this movie. But if you're a Shyamalan superfan, or at least you want to see what's in the loot box, I'd say the movie's still worth a watch. But there's a caveat. It's a fine yet messy thriller, no alcohol required, at matinee price. Yeah, you gotta throw in a caveat here and there. Why not? All right, so Old, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever you thought, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.